3 and move straight away to agenda number 11, which is representation review. And I see Ms Jakes sitting up there, so how do you want to take us through this, Ms Jakes? One moment, Councillor Williams.
Oh, look, Mr Chair, I'm sorry to go back, but could I just make a comment going back to the previous agenda item that I've found out in the break?
Yep, okay, I'll allow that.
It's page 10.33. I just checked with Councillor Darnard, who's knowledgeable in this area, and on the non-compliance of water pressure for use by the New Zealand Fire Service. And I had highlighted that and put unbudgeted cost ! Councillor Darnard has confirmed that indeed is an unbudgeted cost, and for the record could be another significant cost that's been imposed on us by central government, on our ratepayers by central government. So I just wanted to make that.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'm glad I allowed you to do so, because I've had 3 mayors contact me in the last probably 2 months who have had visits from the fire service, as I have had, and they've been told, Mr Mayors, your water pressure is not high enough for us to fight fires, and you will make it high enough for us to fight fires, and left the office. Thanks very much for coming. No money, no financial assistance, no central government assistance, etc., etc. But as those mayors have said, and particularly the Rotorua one who agrees with me, tell them, because at the end of the day, the most expedient way if there's a fire is to ring the airport, get a helicopter and a bucket and start getting it out of here and dropping it on it. Because that would be the most expedient way and cost effective that anybody could ever fight a fire in this district. But hey, it is something that's coming, and you've raised it, and yes, we know about it, and if we were to do it, it would be unbudgeted, but we certainly wouldn't be doing it unbudgeted. You have to take that issue to an annual plan, I would think, or the next LTP. Would that be fair comment?
Yeah, this is not a new issue. So.
We've had it every year, and we just keep going.
I just think it's following on from the LTP deliberations. I think we were all in agreement. It's high time we started pushing back on central government and having councillors talk not only to our MP but also to government cabinet ministers who are carrying these portfolios and making our position very clear, and working with local government New Zealand on some of these unacceptable costs.
This fire one will be at local government New Zealand, because it's involving a lot of districts and a lot of mayors and a lot of councils, and I think we'll be bringing that up at the conference. But we have every year, as Mr Williams said. They're pushing, we're pushing, but we're not going down that track at the moment unless you decide to, and at the end of the day, you are the governance of the Taupo District. So we'll go back to agenda number 11, but that did need to be signalled, and it is something that is in the front of us somewhere. But hopefully, and I certainly am pushing as hard as I am to make sure it's not in the immediate front of us. Ms Jakes.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have workshopped this on a couple of occasions, so I just thought I'd take you through just a couple of the main areas, and it's around our requirement every 6 years to undertake a representation review, and that needs to be done in time for the 2013 elections. So some of the things that we need to consider as part of that review. The first one we did earlier on was in terms of Māori representation, and agreed with the status quo that we have at the moment. And then moving on 11(1), we need to consider our communities of interest. We also need to look around effective representation of those communities of interest, and the options that can be used in relation to those, and then the fair representation. So that's around the plus or minus 10% rule, and then there's a bit of a summary in terms of some future processes. So we have looked at a number of options, and they're outlined on page 11(2), and also contained in the appendixes attached. As a result of some of the information that has been previously discussed at the workshops. This is the formal part of the presentation in terms of making a decision around which representation process or review you want to use. And out of the options that have been looked at, so the at-large option on 11/8, (11/9) was Taupo Town and Rural option, and 11/10 Taupo Turangi and a 3 Rural Ward option. Appendix 4 on 11/11 is 3 wards, which is the current ward system that we have. And then the last on 11/12 was the mixed at-large and ward option. So the recommendation that I have there for you is in relation to the three wards, i.e. the current system or representation arrangements that we currently have.
Okay, so how do you want to handle this? Is there a desire around the room to change from the system we have? That, I guess that's the most important question we need to ask ourselves. Is there a desire or need to change the system we have? Councillor Cook?
We sort of discussed it at length at the workshop, and we all thought it'd be prudent to leave it as is, without knowing what the local government reforms were going to signal.
Okay. Councillor Hickman?
Yeah, I apologise for not being at the last workshop, but I'd just like to make a comment on the Turangi-Tongariro Community Board. With them having 2 councillors as well as 6 members, that puts that up to 8 members. That's actually more than the Taupo-Kaingaroa ward representation. And I think that's a little bit overrepresented personally. So.
Okay, well, Councillor Kepper.
Can I just respond to that? No, that's not correct. The TT ward councillors are appointed to the board, so they're not effectively part of the board, much like yourself and Councillor Crate are sitting at the Mangakino committee.
Okay, did I have another hand up somewhere? Councillor Williams? Oh, hang on, I'll allow that to go back. Apologies.
But irrespective of that, it means that there is 8 people representing Turangi-Tongariro on a community board. And I think that is a large number of representation, and I would have thought we would have addressed that.
So what are you saying, that there should only be how many?
Well, I would say that probably 6, with the 2 representatives from.
So you're saying 4
councillors.
plus 2, or?
Yeah.
Or okay, yeah. I'll just allow that for a minute, Councillor Williams.
Just to say that after the last election, there was an intention that the 2 TT ward councillors would not be appointed back to the board. However, that wasn't the case. The 2 TT ward councillors were appointed back to the board. During the discussion in the workshop, we felt that the status quo should remain, especially if changes are pending next year or whenever, when central government decide what they might bring upon local governments. And Mr. Chairman, Mayor Rick, I'm happy to move the suggested resolution as it is on 11/11.4.
I'll accept your movement and park it for a minute, Councillor Williams.
Yes, I'd like to thank you, Mrs. Jakes, for the work you've done on the representation review, and along with you, I attended the seminar in Wellington held by the Local Government Association. I think as Councillor Kirk has already stated, we to actually go through a review process and go out for consultation would be at quite a cost, and with regard to the perhaps some impact on this region from local government reform that may or may not take place or affect us, it was decided to park it. But I'd just like to make a few comments with regard. I go with the resolution as Councillor Kepp has put on the table, but I'd just like to make a few comments going into the future. We did go with Māori representation, with non-Māori representation, I should say. But I think at that point in time, perhaps the timing wasn't right. It could be signal that it's something that gets looked at in the future. And I agree. I think we should stick with the status quo with all the changes we've got at the moment. But I would have liked to have looked. Had the local government reform not been going, I would have liked to have looked at, for instance, the option as put in Appendix 5. I don't think the rural, some of our major economic drivers, electricity, farming, forestry, are properly represented under the, because that was part of the review process, was the effect of the community of interest. I don't think the communities of interest are necessarily being represented by the way the wards are now. So I do like that model of 6 by ward, 3 from Taupo, 1 from the Kinloch, and more some of those intensive lifestyle blocks, 1 from the Mangakino Pouakani, and 1 from sort of the eastern lands, Turangi. I think that's a good option. And the other point I'd like to make is that the Tongariro Community Board is, costs those ratepayers $80,000 a year, and I guess that is quite a large cost for that. So I guess those ratepayers should be just making sure that they get the maximum benefit from that community board, because it is at quite a cost, a targeted rate, and it's quite a cost to their community. So,
Councillor Mincher?
Just with Gary, keep moving the resolution as it is, but just to clear up a point, a misconception there, it does go to the public after this for consultation. That's the way it goes if you read the process.
Correct. This is an initial proposal which has to go for consultation, and there'll be a hearings and deliberation process.
So even if the councillors here decide they want to keep the status quo, which I have a mover, it still has to go to consultation.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Oh, sorry. I think I think our workshop was around, the fact that it would take a lot more effort to go to consultation with a major change at this stage. I think the point is Councillor Williams is making, and I would concur with that. If you're going to change, it's going to be a more extensive consultation process than leaving the status quo. My personal opinion. Councillor Henderson.
The representation review on representation, and in particular in relation to the Turangi-Tongariro Community Board, is really just a numbers game as I see it. It doesn't actually look at whether this board's effective and whether it's adding value, and I know that within the context and scope of what this review allows, it doesn't seem that can be looked at, but I think it should be. The cost is given as, I think, 100,000, not rather than 80, which is directly rated to Turangi, but I would suggest that there are significant other costs involved in resourcing and supporting that board in one way or another that are not included within that, such that the cost is considerably more, perhaps. So I'd advocate for looking at how effective it is, rather than just it happens to represent the right amount of people with the right numbers. I'm not sure if there is a process open to being able to do that, but I would encourage and support it.
Any further, Councillor Williams?
I'd just like to totally concur with Councillor Henderson's comments regarding looking at the effectiveness of the TT board.
That's a separate issue, though, to this, what we have, this agenda item on the table at the moment. That's a side issue, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've got a mover at the moment, and Councillor Kirk got a hand up.
I'd just like to second the suggested resolution.
Okay, so the resolution is now on the table with a mover and a seconder. and just to talk over it, but it is a separate issue, having a look at the effectiveness, which you're concurring with Councillor Henderson of the Community Board. So if anybody does want anything further to say, I will put it to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. But just allowing a bit, is what sort of, Ms McLeod or Mr Williams, what sort of workload are we putting on you if we asked you to come back with some sort of paper or on the effectiveness of the community board? Is that what you're asking? Benefit ratio of the effectiveness?
I'm not sure about the methodology of how you'd look at its effectiveness. I'm not open to what the best way to do that may be, but I do know that from what I've observed that it would be a worthwhile and prudent exercise in terms of ratepayer expenditure to look at how effective it is.
Is there any Councillor Gabba?
Yeah, perhaps if that's the way this council goes, we should look at the review of all of our structures, including this council.
Okay, does anybody want to take this conversation any further, or are we just going to points noted?
Points noted.
Okay, points noted. I was going to, and I am going to, tell you about a half-hour meeting I had with Minister Carter 2 Saturdays ago, was it? 1 Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago, and Minister Tolley, which I think it's more prudent that I do it in the confidential section of my conversations with them both from last Saturday, was it? National Party Conference?
2 Saturdays.
Might have been 2 Saturdays ago, I'm losing track of time. So I'll do it in confidence. I think it's best, otherwise I may be destroying confidences. So we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Number 12.
And there's an additional...
Yes, I was just going to say that. Agenda item number 12. You should have a handout of these council engagements. So if we could just slip that into your agenda and ignore the one in the agenda. And as you can see, Friends of Lake Taupo presentation has moved to August at their request. Joshua, I'm very keen to see them present to you as... I think Councillor Kep, were you there the night they did the presentation?